Nearly 300 children were moved from a border facility in Clint, Texas today after a public outcry over what lawyers described to the New York Times as a chaotic scene of sickness and filth. According to multiple reports, lawyers who interviewed children at the site say they lacked access to showers, soap, toothbrushes, toothpaste, everything. They described children sleeping on the floor, of flu and lice outbreaks, and young children caring for infants. Some of the children had been there for up to 27 days. And though many of the children crossed the border with family members, they are considered to be unaccompanied if they cross with someone other than their biological parents or legal guardians. Legally, immigration officials are required to hold minors in facilities that are safe and sanitary. But last week, a government lawyer argued that basic toiletries and items like a blanket weren't necessarily required by law. Let's watch.
It's within everybody's common understanding that, if you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that? Do you agree to that?
Well, I think there's fair reason to find that those things may be part of safe and sanitary.
Maybe, are a part. What do you say maybe? You mean there are circumstances when a person doesn't need to have a toothbrush, toothpaste, and soap for days?
Well, I think in CBP custody, it's frequently intended to be much shorter term. So it may be that for a shorter term stay in CBP custody that some of those things may not be required.
I'm joined now by Erica Andiola, Chief Advocacy Officer at the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Service. Thank you so much, Erica. And I guess what people need to do is get a picture of what it's like, what it was like over the last several weeks in that situation these kids were in, very young kids. What grabbed me was kids 7 years old taking care of even younger kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me just start by saying that this is not a new situation. This is a situation that has been happening for many, many years. And I can tell you that, these new facilities are popping up now, where there's actual tents. People are really starting to see what's going on in there. But I can tell you that migrants have been treated this way for a really long time under the custody of Border Patrol agents. And, we talk about, we see on social media, a lot of people outreach around the toothpaste and the toothbrushes, et cetera. But it goes even beyond that. We have seen a lot of people who we've been representing as Raices, that, people sometimes don't have ability to go to see a doctor. A lot of people, there's children who have died because they have said, I'm sick, I don't feel good, they get ignored. I mean, it's really a huge problem that has happened for a while. And to me, the most unbelievable part of this is that this is not a new crisis. Every year, there's a wave of migrant children who come either unaccompanied or with family members who get either separated, as you said before. And so it's not new. The problem is that DHS and Border Patrol have never actually tried to make, the problem go away by actually providing the right, places for children to be at without being in the hands of Border Patrol in these places that are really cold and terrible, or, being in facilities where they can actually be treated as children.
Well, what grabbed me was the portrait of a kid standing on a toilet to try to get fresh air because the room was so crowded he had to get above the crowd of people around him, jammed into this situation to breathe.
That's right. Yes, and if people want to actually look up, there's actually photos on social media and on the web of something called an ice box or a hielera, which is a Border Patrol processing center, where it's literally tiny jail cells where they crowd tons and tons of people, put them in there with some foil blankets on them. They're super cold. That's the reason why they call them hieleras or ice boxes. The migrants, where they come out, they call them that. There's the perreras, the dog kennels. The migrants also call them, in many instances they get placed in other places that literally look like dog kennels that are also super cold. And they don't have the ability to, again, access some of the most basic human needs, whether there's children or adults. In many ways, children and adults get placed in a lot of these processing centers for many, many days. And we have seen people who have actually died. And so It is a crisis, and it's not going to be solved with just saying that we need to either build a wall or, it's not going to be solved with any more politics in D.C. We have to have something change now.
Well, NBC News reports now that a different team of attorneys said they had also encountered children in similar conditions when they visited the Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas this month. Let me what happened in the last 24 hours? Apparently, the heat is on, so to speak, that the government did recognize this is very bad publicity. The kids not having any basic health products. I mean, you need a toothbrush to brush your teeth, and these kids didn't bring one with them, obviously, and they get stuck that they don't stay clean. They have lice, they got flu, they got terrible, obviously, digestive problems that come with being in a place like this. And now, all of a sudden, overnight, 300 of these kids were moved. What's their new situation like? Do you know?
We don't know. We don't have access to a lot of these places where, they're probably going to be moved. What I can tell you is that I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same or worse conditions. And again, to me, this is the moment where Congress needs to make sure that there has to be a solution right here, right now, where these folks can actually have some of the most humane treatment that you can ask for. I mean, any American, any human being who needs something to sleep on, can tell you, like, it just needs a mat and a toothbrush, yes, and medical attention. We can do that right now. And in the long term, we still have to be looking at, why are people leaving Central America? Why are people leaving other countries? And what are we doing to change the system in the long run? But for now, let's try to figure out how to best, make sure that these children and their families are being taken care of in a humane way, and making sure that they're not under Border Patrol for more than 72 hours. They shouldn't be there for longer than that, and they have been.
Okay, thank you so much, Erica Adinola. By the way, I do want to know what the Congress is doing. I think this is pressure on the Congress as well as the president.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.